They think I'm just the boring, pragmatic daughter, the emotionless ATM, the one who shows up, writes checks, and disappears back into her spreadsheets without complaint. They forget that I'm a forensic accountant who specializes in investigating the most sophisticated financial fraud schemes in the country. I've dismantled Ponzi operations that fooled federal regulators. I've traced money through 17 offshore shell companies to catch embezzlers who thought they were untouchable. And right now, I'm standing in the middle of my parents' living room, holding a cardboard box taped together so haphazardly that one corner is already splitting open. Inside is a blender. Not just any blender, the exact same blender I gave my mother 4 years ago as a thoughtful housewarming gift when they downsized. Except now it's filthy. The power cord is crusted with what looks like dried coffee stains. The plastic pitcher is cloudy and scratched. Someone has stuffed a Starbucks gift card inside, and when I pull it out to check, the balance mocks me. $15. $15. Meanwhile, 10 feet away from me, my 29-year-old sister Fallon is literally screaming with joy. And I mean screaming that high-pitched squeal that makes dogs bark 3 blocks away. She's jumping up and down in her overpriced athleisure outfit, waving a document above her head like she just won the lottery. That document is a quitclaim deed to the historic carriage house. The one made of original red brick, with oak hardwood floors and those beautiful arched windows. The one located in the most expensive historic district in our city, surrounded by multi-million-dollar estates and boutique art galleries. The one our grandparents left to the family trust, free and clear, no mortgage, no liens, completely paid off. The one currently valued at $450,000, and my parents just signed it over to her. Just now, in front of 50 guests at their 35th wedding anniversary party. The party I paid for. I'm going to turn it into my yoga sanctuary, Fallon shrieks, clutching the deed to her chest. A healing space. Can you imagine? I'll have crystal grids in every corner and a sound bath area, and oh my goodness, I can already see the Instagram aesthetic. My mother, Marcella, turns to me with that smile. You know the one. The smile that looks warm and maternal to everyone else, but feels like a knife sliding between your ribs when it's directed at you. She's wearing the pearl necklace I gave her last Christmas, the one that cost me $2,000 because she'd mentioned admiring it at Tiffany's. Scarlett, sweetheart, she says, her voice dripping with condescension masked as affection. You're so practical. You don't need these artistic, soulful things. That blender still works fine. I tested it just last week. I stare at the crusted power cord in my hands. She didn't even clean it. My father, Royce, adjusts his tie. The silk Hermes tie I gave him for Father's Day, and nods sagely, as if he's a sage himself dispensing wisdom. You make plenty of money, Scarlett. You can buy whatever you want. Your sister is sensitive. She needs asset security, stability. You understand. I understand perfectly. I understand that I just spent $3,000 of my own money to throw this anniversary party. I hired the jazz quartet currently packing up their instruments in the corner, confused by the sudden tension. I ordered the catering from that upscale French place my mother loves, the one with the $40 per person minimum. I arranged the flowers, booked the venue at this historic inn, sent the invitations, and coordinated with my parents' friends to make sure they all showed up to celebrate this milestone. And my gift, my real gift, not this humiliation, was an envelope with a check for $5,000 toward the European river cruise they've been talking about for years. An envelope that's currently sitting unopened on the gift table, probably buried under casserole dishes and wine bottles. But let me back up. Let me tell you exactly how we got here, because this moment, this perfect storm of disrespect and favoritism, didn't come out of nowhere. This has been building my entire life. 2 hours earlier, everything seemed fine. Well, as fine as things ever are in the Kingsley family. I arrived early to make sure the setup was perfect. Sterling, my fiancé, came with me, carrying the gift bag with the cruise check and a leather-bound photo album. I'd spent weeks assembling pictures from my parents' wedding, old family vacations, their life together. Sentimental and expensive, just the way Mom likes her gifts. You sure about all this? Sterling asked as we walked in, his hand warm on the small of my back. He's a corporate lawyer, 6'2" with dark blonde hair and the kind of steady presence that makes you feel safe. He's also the only person in my life who's ever questioned whether I should keep trying so hard with my family. It's their 35th anniversary, I said, smoothing down my navy dress. I want to do this right. He kissed my temple. You always do. The party started beautifully. The jazz quartet played Sinatra and Ella Fitzgerald. The food was exceptional. People kept complimenting the brie en croûte and the herb-crusted salmon. My parents held court in the center of the room, accepting congratulations and well wishes, looking exactly like the picture-perfect couple they've always presented to the world. Fallon showed up 40 minutes late, of course, making an entrance in a flowing white dress that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. She's always had that gift, the ability to walk into a room and make it revolve around her. She's beautiful in that effortless way some people are, with long dark hair and the kind of bone structure that photographs well. Which is good, because photographing herself is essentially her full-time job. Or it was supposed to be. The influencer career never quite took off the way she'd planned. Last I'd heard, she had maybe 8,000 followers, most of them probably bots. But that doesn't stop her from treating every moment like it's content for her non-existent brand. She air-kissed me, not even touching my cheeks, just making the sound near my face, and immediately started circulating, phone in hand, taking selfies with the floral arrangements I'd ordered. I should have known something was wrong when Dad clinked his glass halfway through dinner. "Can I have everyone's attention?" he called out, standing up with that broad smile he uses when he's about to make an announcement. Mom stood beside him, her hand on his arm, both of them glowing with whatever secret they were about to reveal. My stomach tightened, but I told myself it was nothing. Maybe they were renewing their vows. Maybe they were announcing the cruise I'd just funded. Maybe. "Marcella and I have been thinking a lot about legacy lately," Dad said, his voice carrying that practiced, authoritative tone. He's always been good at commanding a room. It's what made him successful in commercial real estate before he retired. About what we want to leave behind for our girls. And we've decided not to wait until we're gone. We want to see our daughters enjoy their inheritance now, while we're still here to share in the joy. Oh no. "Fallon, sweetheart, come up here." My sister practically floated to the front, all glowing skin and excited energy. I watched from my seat, Sterling's hand finding mine under the table, squeezing gently. Dad pulled out the deed then. The actual, legal, quitclaim, deed, notarized and everything. He must have had it prepared weeks ago, maybe months. "Your grandmother's carriage house," he announced, "is now yours. Free and clear. We know you've been searching for your purpose, your calling. Your mother and I believe that you need a space that's truly yours, where you can build something meaningful. A healing studio, a yoga sanctuary, whatever speaks to your soul." The room erupted in applause. People were congratulating Fallon, who was crying pretty tears that somehow didn't ruin her makeup. Mom was beaming. Dad looked proud enough to burst. And I was doing math. $450,000. That's what the carriage house is worth. I looked it up last year when I was curious about property values in that neighborhood. It's a unique property, original 1,890 construction, meticulously maintained by my grandmother until she passed, located on a corner lot in the historic district where properties rarely come on the market. The architectural details alone make it valuable. Exposed brick, original timber beams, those tall arched windows with the wavy glass. Fallon, who has never held a job for more than 6 months. Fallon, who still asks Mom to make her doctor's appointments. Fallon, who literally called me last year to ask how to file taxes. They just gave her a $500,000 asset. "Scarlett, honey, come here." Mom called, and I stood up on legs that felt numb, walking to the front like a prisoner approaching the gallows. That's when she bent down and pulled out the cardboard box from under the gift table. I recognized it immediately. The shape, the size, the way the tape was yellowing at the edges. My hands opened it automatically, even though some part of my brain was screaming at me to stop, to run, to refuse whatever humiliation was coming. The blender sat there, grimy and pathetic, with that $15 Starbucks card stuck to the pitcher with what looked like dried honey. "I thought you could use this," Mom said brightly, like she was giving me something precious. "You're always so busy with work. This will help with those breakfast smoothies you're always talking about. And the gift card is for your coffee. I know how much you love your lattes." The room went quiet. I could feel 50 pairs of eyes on me, watching, waiting to see how I'd react. Dad leaned in, his voice lower now but still audible to the front tables. "You make plenty of money, Scarlett. You can buy whatever you want. Your sister is sensitive. She needs asset security. You're strong. You don't need things like this to feel valued." Strong. That's always been the word, hasn't it? strong, independent, practical, self-sufficient. Translation: you don't need love, attention, or fairness because you're too busy being useful. I looked at Fallon, still clutching her deed, still crying her pretty tears. I looked at my parents, so pleased with themselves, so certain they'd done the right thing. And something inside me, something that had been bending and bending for 33 years, finally snapped. Not broke, snapped. There's a difference. When something breaks, it's weak, it's destroyed, it can't be used anymore. When something snaps, it becomes a weapon. I set the box down on the gift table with exaggerated care. Then I pulled out my phone, right there in front of everyone, and called the catering company. "Hi, this is Scarlett Kingsley," I said, my voice perfectly calm. "I need to cancel the payment authorization for tonight's event. Yes, I know the party is happening right now. I'm revoking my credit card authorization." Immediately. Mom's face went white. "Scarlett, what are you?" I held up one finger. Wait, and continued with the venue coordinator. "Same thing. I'm canceling my payment. The party hosts will need to settle the bill themselves. Thank you." The jazz quartet stopped playing mid-song. I picked up the dirty blender, held it up so everyone could see the crusted cord, the grimy pitcher, and enunciated each word with crystalline clarity. "I think you two will need this to pulverize your hopes of me funding your retirement." Then I walked out. Sterling grabbed our coats and followed without a word, and by the time we reached my Audi Q5 in the parking lot, I could hear the chaos erupting inside. Raised voices. Mom's protests. The venue coordinator demanding payment. Not my problem anymore. "You okay?" Sterling asked as I started the engine, my hands perfectly steady on the wheel. "I'm free," I said. And I meant it. That was the moment right there in that parking lot with the sounds of my parents' anniversary party collapsing behind me that I stopped being their ATM. But that was just the beginning. Because they don't know that I'm not just a boring number cruncher. In my line of work, we have a saying: the math doesn't have emotions, and neither does the audit. I've spent 10 years tracing hidden assets for the FBI and dismantling corporate frauds. I don't need to scream, or fight, or beg for respect. I just need to open the books. And their books are wide open. 18 months of blessed silence have passed since I walked out of that anniversary party. 18 months of not speaking to my parents or my sister. No calls, no texts, no awkward family dinners where I smile and pretend everything is fine while being treated like a convenient bank account with legs. 18 months of building my life exactly the way I want it. Sterling and I bought a penthouse downtown, 2,000 square feet of floor-to-ceiling windows and modern design, with a view of the city skyline that makes every morning feel like victory. We furnished it ourselves, choosing every piece together. No hand-me-downs, no guilt-laden family heirlooms that come with strings attached. Just clean lines, comfortable furniture, and space that belongs entirely to us. My career has flourished. I made senior director at my firm 6 months ago, leading the most complex fraud investigations in the region. My income has increased by 40%. I've been featured in 2 industry publications for my work dismantling a healthcare billing scheme that had been running for 7 years. I am thriving. But I'd be lying if I said I never thought about them. Not because I missed them, absolutely not. Because I'm a forensic accountant, and once you train your brain to spot patterns, you can't turn it off. It becomes reflex, like breathing. So, when I occasionally checked public records, property tax filings, business registrations, municipal violations, I told myself it was just professional habit, due diligence, keeping my skills sharp. That's how I found the gold mine. It started innocently enough. I was having coffee one Saturday morning, Sterling still asleep in our bedroom, and I pulled up the county property database on my laptop. Just curious, I told myself. Just wondering what Fallon had actually done with that $450,000 gift. The answer? Absolutely nothing productive. According to her Instagram, which I occasionally checked through a fake account because I'm petty but not stupid, she'd posted exactly 3 photos inside the carriage house in the first month after the party. All carefully staged shots of her doing yoga poses in empty rooms, captioned with nonsense about finding her inner goddess and creating sacred space. Then the posts stopped. Instead, her feed filled up with party pictures. The carriage house wasn't a healing sanctuary. It was a venue for her to host wine nights with her equally unemployed friends. There were photos of string lights hung haphazardly across the original timber beams, pictures of someone's boyfriend doing a keg stand in the kitchen, a video of Fallon and 3 friends dancing on the porch at 2 in the morning, disturbing every neighbor on that quiet, expensive street. But the Instagram feed was just entertainment. The real discovery came from the city database. You see, the historic district doesn't just sound fancy, it comes with actual legal requirements. Strict ones. When you own property in that zone, you're not just a homeowner, you're a custodian of architectural history. There are rules about exterior maintenance, paint colors, landscaping, even the height of your grass, and violations come with penalties. I pulled up the property record for the carriage house address and felt my pulse quicken as line after line of violation notices loaded on my screen. Violation has shown 847, HG. Failure to maintain landscaping to code standards. Front lawn grass exceeds 8 inches in height. Fine, $500 per day until corrected. Violation, Heishonenanatu 3HG. Exterior wooden window frames showing visible rot and peeling paint. Failure to restore using historically approved paint colors per Section 4.7 of Historic District Guidelines. Fine, $500 per day until corrected. Violation #2110 HG. Removal of original storm shutters without proper permits. Fine, $1,000 per day until shutters restored or alternative approved. I sat back in my chair, coffee forgotten, and done the math. The first violation was dated 8 months ago. The window frame violation started 6 months ago. The shutter issue was 4 months old. $500 per day for 240 days. $500 per day for 180 days. $1,000 per day for 120 days. Plus property taxes. Because of course Fallon hadn't paid those either. The numbers danced in my head like music. $120,000 in grass violations. $90,000 in window frame violations. $120,000 in shutter violations. $18,000 in unpaid property taxes. Add in the accruing interest and administrative fees, and we were looking at roughly $350,000 in municipal liens, on a property worth $450,000. I pulled up the violation notices themselves. They'd all been mailed to the carriage house address, certified letters, every one of them. And according to the tracking information, they'd been delivered but never signed for. Fallon didn't even know she was being fined. Or more likely, she'd seen the official-looking envelopes and ignored them, the way she ignores anything that requires adult responsibility. The city had placed a priority lien on the property 4 weeks ago. That lien sits above all other claims, even a mortgage, if there were one. It means the city gets paid first, before anyone else, if the property is sold or foreclosed. I sat there in my beautiful penthouse, sunlight streaming through the windows, and smiled. Because here's what Fallon and my parents don't understand about the world. Debt doesn't disappear because you ignore it. It grows, it compounds, it becomes something alive and hungry. And the city doesn't care about your feelings or your potential, or your healing journey. The city wants its money. I spent the next 2 weeks researching municipal lien purchases. It's not as common as buying defaulted mortgages, but it's legal, and it's powerful. When someone fails to pay city fines or taxes, the municipality can sell that debt to private investors to recover the money immediately. And once a private investor owns the lien, they have extraordinary power. They can foreclose, they can force a sale, they can negotiate settlements, they can make someone's life very, very difficult. I formed the LLC on a Tuesday. M-A-R-S, capital, LLC, standing for Municipal Asset Recovery Services. Registered in Delaware for privacy, with a local agent address that couldn't be traced back to me. It sounded boring, bureaucratic, and completely official. On a Monday, I called the city's revenue department. I'm interested in purchasing the municipal liens on a property in the historic district. I said, all business, no emotion. What's the process? 3 days later, after some paperwork and a wire transfer of $348,750, every penny of accumulated fines, penalties, interest, and unpaid taxes, I owned the debt, all of it. The city was thrilled. They got their money immediately, instead of spending years trying to collect from Fallon through court proceedings. And I got leverage. Complete, total, crushing leverage. The carriage house my sister had been given, the asset worth $450,000 that was supposed to provide her with security, was now effectively mine. She just didn't know it yet. I told Sterling that night, showing him the documentation over dinner at our dining table. He studied the papers, his lawyer brain processing the implications, and then looked up at me with something like awe. "You bought your sister's debt." "I bought the city's debt," I corrected. "My sister just happens to be the one who owes it. She's going to lose the house. Only if she can't pay me back $348,750, plus the interest I'm legally entitled to charge as the lien holder." Sterling laughed then, shaking his head. "They really have no idea what they did, do they? Giving a $500,000 asset to someone who can't even remember to pay property taxes." "No," I agreed, refilling my wine glass. "They have no idea." But I wasn't ready to make my move yet. This wasn't about revenge in the hot, impulsive sense. This was about strategic consequence. About teaching a lesson that would actually be learned. So I waited. I watched the carriage house deteriorate further through public records and occasional drive-bys. The grass grew taller. The window frames got worse. Fallon continued posting Instagram photos from expensive brunch spots and weekend trips, apparently funded by whoever was enabling her this month. Probably my parents. I watched. I waited. I let the trap sit there, perfectly constructed, ready to spring. Because I knew with the certainty that comes from 33 years of being underestimated, that eventually, they would need me again. They always need me again. And when they came calling, when they inevitably reached out with their hands extended and their expectations enormous, I would be ready. Not with a checkbook this time. With consequences. The call that finally broke the silence came on Wednesday evening next week. Sterling and I were cooking dinner together. He was handling the pasta while I prepped a salad when my phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced at the screen and felt my stomach tighten. Aunt Ramona. She's my father's younger sister, and the only person in my extended family who's ever acknowledged that the way my parents treat me is fundamentally wrong. She's called me out of the blue maybe 3 times in the past year, usually just to check in, to make sure I'm okay, to remind me that I'm not crazy for keeping my distance. I answered on speaker. "Hey, Aunt Ramona." "Scarlett, honey." Her voice was tight with stress. "I'm at City Hospital. Your father is in the ER." My hand froze over the cutting board. Sterling looked up sharply. "What happened?" "Your mother says it's a heart attack. They brought him in about 40 minutes ago. She's not handling it well. She asked me to call you." Of course she did. Mom would never call me directly. That would require admitting she needs me. "Is he stable?" I asked, my forensic accountant brain automatically organizing the situation into facts and data points. "The doctors are running tests now. Scarlett, I think you should come. Whatever has happened between you and your parents, if something happens to your father." "I'll be there in 20 minutes, I said, and ended the call. Sterling had already turned off the stove. "I'm driving." "You don't have to." "Scarlett." He took my face in his hands, his gray eyes serious. "I'm driving. You're shaking." I looked down at my hands and realized he was right. They were trembling. Not from fear, from something else entirely. The drive to the hospital should have been 17 minutes. Sterling made it in 14, navigating evening traffic with the kind of calm competence that reminds me why I'm marrying him. But I wasn't focused on the traffic. I was focused on the trembling in my hands, and the memory that trembling had triggered. "You know what I'm thinking about?" I said suddenly, staring out the window at the city lights blurring past. Sterling reached over and took my hand. "Tell me." 3 years ago, August 14th, 2:30 in the morning. My voice sounded flat, detached, like I was reading a case file. I had acute appendicitis. The pain was so intense I couldn't stand up straight. I was on the floor of my bathroom, trying not to throw up, and I called Mom. Sterling's hand tightened on mine. I told her I thought my appendix was rupturing. I said I needed help getting to the ER. Do you know what she said? "Scarlett." She said she couldn't leave the house. She said Fallon had just broken up with her boyfriend, some guy she'd been dating for 3 weeks, and Fallon was threatening to cut off all her hair. Mom said she couldn't take her eyes off her for even a minute because Fallon was having a crisis. The words were coming faster now, a dam breaking after years of pressure. She told me to call an Uber. She said I was capable and strong and I'd figure it out. So I did. I called an Uber, and some guy named Marcus drove me to the emergency room, while I held a trash bag in my lap in case I threw up. I admitted myself. I signed my own surgical consent forms while the surgeon told me my appendix was close to rupturing. I went into surgery alone. I woke up in recovery alone. Sterling pulled over right there on the side of the road, hazards on, and turned to face me. The next morning, I continued, staring straight ahead. I was lying in my hospital room with an IV in my arm, and I checked Instagram. Because I'm an idiot and I couldn't help myself. And there was a photo Mom had posted at 3 a.m. the night before. Her and Fallon, eating pizza in their pajamas, watching a movie. The caption said, "Heartbreak Healing Sleepover" with a bunch of heart emojis. Unbelievable, Sterling breathed. She posted a picture of eating pizza with my sister while I was in surgery. Sterling pulled me into his arms then, as much as the car's center console would allow, and I let him hold me even though I wasn't crying. I was past crying. That required having some grief left, some hope that things could be different. I had none. "That's why I'm shaking," I said into his shoulder. "Not because I'm afraid Dad is dying, but because 3 years ago, I nearly died, and they chose my sister's bad haircut over me. And now Dad has a panic attack over some financial stress because I'm sure that's what this is, not an actual heart attack, and suddenly I'm supposed to come running?" Sterling pulled back to look at me, his hands on my shoulders. "You don't have to go in there." "Yes, I do." "Why?" I smiled then, and I could feel how cold it was. Because they're about to find out that the financial stress isn't random bad luck. And I want to see their faces when they realize who's been holding the knife all along. Sterling studied me for a long moment, and I wondered if he'd try to talk me out of it, try to convince me to take the high road, be the bigger person. All those exhausting platitudes people use when they want you to accept mistreatment gracefully. Instead, he kissed my forehead and said, "Then let's go teach them what consequences look like." That's why I'm marrying him. We walked into the hospital together, Sterling's hand solid and steady on my back. The automatic doors slid open, bringing the smell of antiseptic and anxiety that all hospitals share. The fluorescent lights made everything look washed out, surreal. I knew exactly where to go: the VIP waiting room, 3rd floor. Of course they'd be in the VIP section. My parents would never wait with the common people, even in a medical emergency. The elevator ride took forever and no time at all. When the doors opened on the 3rd floor, I heard my mother's voice before I saw her. And she won't even answer her phone. I've called 6 times. 6! After everything we've given her, after we raised her, fed her, paid for her education. Aunt Ramona's voice cut through, tired and firm. "Marcella, maybe she didn't answer because you haven't spoken to her in 18 months except to..." There she is. Mom had spotted me. She came rushing down the hallway, her hair slightly disheveled, mascara smudged under her eyes. She was wearing the cashmere cardigan I'd given her 2 Christmases ago. She reached for me like she was going to hug me, and I stepped smoothly to the side, letting her momentum carry her past me. Sterling moved subtly to block her from trying again. "How's Dad?" I asked, my voice professionally neutral. "Oh, now you care?" Mom's grief transformed instantly into anger. "Now you decide to show up? After abandoning your family for over a year? After humiliating us at our anniversary party? After..." "Marcella." Dad's voice came from the waiting room doorway. He looked pale but steady, standing on his own 2 feet. "That's enough." Not an actual heart attack then, just as I'd suspected. I walked past my mother without another word and faced my father. "What did the doctors say?" He had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "Panic attack. Stress-induced. They want to keep me for observation overnight, but I'm fine." "Good," I said. "Then I'll be going." "Wait." He held up a hand. "We need to talk. About Fallon. About the house." There it was, the real reason for the emergency call. I looked at Aunt Ramona, who gave me a small, apologetic shrug. She'd been used as bait, and she knew it. "5 minutes," I said, "in private." Dad nodded and gestured to a smaller consultation room off the main waiting area. Sterling started to follow me, but I squeezed his hand. "Wait here. I'll be fine." "You sure?" "I'm sure. Because this wasn't about needing protection. This was about watching them walk into the trap I'd built, and I wanted to see every second of it with perfect clarity. I followed my father into the consultation room, and Mom rushed in behind us before I could close the door. Typical. The room was small, clinical, with 2 chairs and a small couch. Medical pamphlets lined a rack on the wall. Dad sat heavily in one chair. Mom perched on the couch's edge, her hands twisting together. I remained standing. "So," I said, "what's the crisis?" For a moment, neither of them spoke. Dad looked at Mom. Mom looked at her hands. The silence stretched taut, and I let it. I've learned from interrogating fraud suspects that people will say anything to fill an uncomfortable silence. They'll confess to things you didn't even know to ask about. Finally, Mom broke. "The house," she said, her voice cracking. "Fallon's house. The carriage house. We're going to lose it." I raised an eyebrow. "How unfortunate." "Unfortunate?" Mom's head snapped up, her eyes flashing. "Is that all you have to say? Your sister is about to lose everything because of some technicality, some ridiculous city fines, and all you can say is unfortunate? What would you like me to say?" "That you'll help." She stood up, taking a step toward me. "That despite our differences, you'll still do the right thing for family. Scarlett, they're going to foreclose. Some company called MARS Capital bought all the debt. They sent a letter yesterday saying, Fallon has 30 days to pay the full amount, or they're taking the house." I felt a thrill run through me, not guilt, not shame, but pure satisfaction. They'd received my letter. "How much does she owe?" I asked, keeping my face carefully neutral. Dad cleared his throat. "With the accumulated fines, the property taxes, and the interest this company is charging, it's approximately $348,000. That's quite a bit." "It's devastating," Mom said, tears starting to flow now. "Real ones this time, not the pretty crying she does for effect. We tried to pay it ourselves, but we don't have that kind of liquid cash. We'd have to sell our house, and we're too old to start over, and Fallon certainly doesn't have it. She's been struggling, trying to find her path." "Partying," I corrected calmly. "She's been partying. I've seen the Instagram posts." Mom's mouth tightened. "She's young. She's figuring things out, but she doesn't deserve to lose her home because of some bureaucratic nonsense about grass height and paint colors. It's insane that the city can charge so much for." "The city isn't charging it anymore," I said. MARS Capital is. They bought the debt, and as the new lien holder, they have every legal right to foreclose if the debt isn't paid. "We know that," Dad snapped, some of his old authority creeping back into his voice. "That's why we need you to pay it." The words hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. "Excuse me?" Mom rushed forward again. "Scarlett, please. I know we've had our issues. I know you felt hurt by the anniversary gift situation, but surely you can see past that now. This is family. This is your sister's future. You have the money you've always had money. You make twice what your father made at your age. A few $100,000 is nothing to you." $348,750, I said precisely. "Plus ongoing interest accrual. That's not a few $100,000. That's more than most people make in 7 years." "But you're not most people," Dad said. He stood up slowly, pulling out his card about patriarchal wisdom. "You're a Kingsley, and Kingsleys take care of family. Your grandfather would be ashamed if he knew you were letting your sister lose the house he built." There it was. The guilt card, the family honor card, the invocation of the dead grandfather who'd actually liked me, unlike these two. I felt nothing. "Grandfather's house," I said softly, "that you gave to Fallon without even asking me. That you transferred to a 29-year-old with no job, no income, and no ability to maintain it. That you handed over at a party I paid $3,000 to throw, while giving me a dirty blender." "We've apologized for that," Mom said, though we all knew that was a lie. She'd never apologized. Neither of them had. "Have you? Well, we're acknowledging it now," she snapped, her fake sympathy cracking around the edges. "And what do you want, Scarlett? You want us to grovel? To beg? Fine. I'm begging. Please help your sister. She's young and foolish, yes, but she doesn't deserve to be homeless." "She won't be homeless. She doesn't live there." Mom's face flushed. "That's not the point." "What is the point, Mom?" I asked, my voice still calm, still detached. The point is that you want me to fix the consequences of your terrible decisions. Again. You gave a valuable asset to someone incompetent, and now that incompetence has come due. And instead of letting Fallon face the natural consequences of not paying her property taxes or maintaining her property, you want me to swoop in and make it all disappear. She's your sister, Dad said, his voice hard now, all pretense of warmth gone. Family helps family. Family. I tasted the word like poison. When was the last time this family helped me? When I was in surgery alone. When I needed a down payment on my first apartment, and you said no because you were funding Fallon's photography business that lasted 6 weeks? When I graduated top of my class and you missed the ceremony because Fallon had a yoga retreat? You never needed help, Mom said, and there was actual resentment in her voice now. Everything always came so easy to you. School, work, money. You never struggled like Fallon struggles. You don't know what it's like to be coddled? I interrupted. To be enabled? To be given everything and taught nothing? You're right. I don't know what that's like. I know what it's like to earn everything I have while watching my sister get everything for free. Dad's face was reddening now, his stress levels clearly rising again. This is getting us nowhere. Scarlett, bottom line, will you help or not? This was it. The moment. I could see them both tense, waiting for my answer. They were expecting one of two responses. Either I'd say yes and write them a check like I always used to, or I'd say no and walk out, confirming their narrative that I'm cold and selfish. They weren't prepared for option 3. I let the silence stretch just long enough to make them uncomfortable, then walked slowly to the door and opened it. Sterling? I called out. Could you bring the briefcase? Mom and Dad exchanged confused looks. Hope flickered across Mom's face. She thought the briefcase meant a checkbook. Sterling appeared in the doorway carrying his leather litigation briefcase, the one he uses for court appearances. His expression was professionally neutral, giving nothing away. Thank you, I said, taking the briefcase from him. He gave my hand a quick squeeze before stepping back into the waiting room, though he left the door open. Aunt Ramona appeared behind him, curiosity clear on her face. I set the briefcase on the small table and opened it with deliberate slowness. You want my help? I said, not looking at them, focusing on the briefcase locks. You think I should just write a check for $348,750, plus interest, to save Fallon from her own negligence? Yes, Mom breathed. Yes, exactly. But, here's what you don't understand. I pulled out the first document. I've spent 18 months learning exactly how much damage financial irresponsibility can cause. I've watched that grandfather's house deteriorate because Fallon couldn't be bothered to cut the grass or maintain the window frames. I laid the document on the table. It was a printout of all the municipal violations, complete with photos the city inspector had taken. The overgrown yard, the rotting window frames, the missing shutters. Dad's face went pale as he looked at the images. I've watched her treat a $450,000 asset like a party venue, I continued, pulling out more documents. Instagram printouts, photos of beer cans on the historic porch, videos of her friends climbing on the original timber beams. Where did you get these? Mom whispered. Instagram is public, Mom. Anyone can see them, including the Historic Preservation Board, who I'm sure would be fascinated to see how Fallon has been treating this protected property. I pulled out the next stack. Property tax records, violation notices, the escalating fines. Fallon received 17 certified letters from the city, I said. 17 warnings that she was in violation. 17 chances to correct the problems before the fines became catastrophic. She ignored all of them. She didn't know, Mom started. She didn't care, I corrected. There's a difference. And now the bill has come due. I pulled out the final document, the one I'd been building to. The M.A.R.S. Capital LLC purchase agreement with the city. This, I said, laying it carefully on top of the pile, is the proof that someone bought Fallon's debt from the city 3 months ago. All $348,750 of it. Dad reached for the document, his hands shaking slightly. His eyes scanned the legal text, the transaction details, He stopped breathing. What? Mom demanded. What is it? But Dad had found it, right there in the corporate registration documents I'd helpfully included. M.A.R.S. Capital LLC, registered agent, Sterling J. Bennett, attorney at law. Officers of the corporation. You, Dad whispered, looking up at me with something I'd never seen in his eyes before. Fear. You bought the debt. Your MARS capital. Mom's face went through a rapid series of expressions: confusion, realization, horror, rage. You're foreclosing on your own sister? Her voice was shrill enough to carry into the waiting room. I'm not foreclosing on anyone, I said calmly. I'm simply the lien holder. Fallon can pay the debt, and the house is hers to keep. She just needs to come up with $348,750, plus the ongoing interest that accrues at the legally allowable rate of 12% per annum. That's over $40,000 a year in interest alone, Dad said. Yes, that's how debt works. This is insane, Mom said, her voice rising. You're destroying your sister out of spite. Over a blender. You're willing to take everything from her because we gave you a used blender instead of a house worth $450,000? I smiled. No, Mom. This isn't about the blender. The blender was just the moment I realized who you people really are. This is about consequences. Natural, legal, appropriate consequences for 18 months of negligence and entitlement. So, you're just going to take the house, Dad said flatly. I don't want the house. I want Fallon to pay her debts like an adult. She can't. Then she'll lose the house. That's how it works when you don't pay your bills. Mom made a sound like a wounded animal. You evil, ungrateful. Actually, I interrupted, I'm prepared to make an offer. They both froze. I reached into the briefcase one more time and pulled out a document Sterling had prepared yesterday. A settlement agreement, printed on proper legal letterhead, with signature lines and everything. I will forgive the debt entirely. I said. All $348,750. Fallon keeps the house, free and clear, and I'll transfer the lien release documents as soon as this agreement is executed. Hope blazed across both their faces. However, I continued, there are conditions. What conditions? Dad asked warily. I held up the agreement so they could see the terms clearly. First, Mom and Dad, you will pay me back the $80,000 you've borrowed from me over the years. Every emergency loan you never paid back. Every time you asked me to cover something and promised to repay me next month. I have records of every transaction. That payment is due within 90 days. Mom's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Second, you will sell your house, your primary residence, and use the proceeds to pay me that $80,000, plus pay off your own debts. I know you're underwater on your credit cards and behind on your own property taxes. You'll use the remaining money to move into something you can actually afford. A rental, perhaps. Something modest. You can't be serious, Dad said. I'm extremely serious. You gave away a $450,000 asset to someone who couldn't maintain it while asking me to fund your retirement. Those decisions have consequences. You'll downsize, pay your debts, and live within your means like everyone else in the world. And if we refuse? Mom asked, her voice venomous. I shrugged. Then I foreclose on Fallon in 30 days, take the house and sell it at auction. I'll probably net around $400,000 after fees. And you'll still owe me the $80,000 I can pursue through civil court. Plus, you'll have a daughter who's homeless and unemployable. Your choice. Dad was reading the agreement now, his lawyer's eyes catching every detail. This also requires Fallon to get a job, he said. Any job. Within 60 days. Yes, she needs to demonstrate that she's capable of supporting herself like an adult. The job just has to be documented. Employment taxes, pay stubs, the works. She'll never agree to this, Mom said. Then she'll never get to keep the house. Those are the terms. I placed the agreement on the table between us, along with a pen. You have 48 hours to decide, I said. Sign this, execute the terms, and everyone moves forward. Refuse and I move forward with foreclosure. Sterling will be waiting in the hallway to answer any legal questions you might have. I picked up my purse and turned toward the door. Scarlett, Dad said, his voice strange. Not angry. Something else. When did you become this cold? I looked back at him, at both of them, sitting in that sterile consultation room surrounded by evidence of all their failures. I'm not cold, I said quietly. I'm just done being warm for people who'd rather burn me for heat than build their own fire. And I walked out, leaving them with the agreement, the evidence, and the choice. Sterling was waiting for me, his hand immediately finding mine. How'd it go? He asked quietly. The trap is sprung, I said. Now we wait to see if they're smart enough to take the exit I'm offering. 48 hours passed in silence. When the deadline arrived, my parents didn't ask to meet at their house. They requested a meeting in the hospital cafeteria, since Dad had been discharged but was waiting for final prescriptions. Neutral ground, public, safe. They were sitting at a small round table when Sterling and I arrived. Fallon was there too, wearing large sunglasses and looking bored, scrolling through her phone. Mom and Dad didn't look defeated, though. They looked oddly confident. Dad had a folder in front of him, not the one I gave him, but a new one. We're glad you came, Dad said, gesturing to the empty chairs. He didn't stand up. Do you have the signed agreement? I asked, remaining standing. We have an agreement, Dad corrected, tapping the folder. A counteroffer. We've reviewed your terms, Scarlett, and frankly, they're draconian. We are willing to pay back the $80,000 over a 5-year period. But we will not be selling our home. That is non-negotiable. And requiring Fallon to get a menial job is just vindictive. Mom nodded, crossing her arms. We're your parents, not your tenants. You can't just order us to sell our property. And if you try to foreclose on the carriage house, we've spoken to a lawyer friend. He says we can tie this up in probate court for years. It's a family dispute. Judges hate these things. You'll spend more on legal fees than the debt is worth. They stared at me, smug and self-assured. They thought they had called my bluff. They thought the worst I could do was a civil lawsuit. I looked at Sterling. He didn't smile, but his eyes were dancing. Actually, I said, my voice cutting through the cafeteria chatter like a blade through silk. There's something we need to discuss before we talk about civil court. I reached into my bag and pulled out a manila folder. I didn't slam it down. I placed it gently on top of Dad's counter-offer. Do you remember this? The quitclaim deed you had me sign? Mom frowned. What does that have to do with anything? Let me refresh your memory. I flipped it open. Line 37. Declared property value. $25,000. That's what you put down to avoid gift tax implications. Dad waved a hand dismissively. That's standard practice. Everyone does that. Everyone commits tax fraud? I tilted my head. Interesting defense strategy. It's not fraud, Dad scoffed. It's creative accounting. The IRS disagrees, I said. You see, the problem is that the carriage house isn't worth $25,000. It never was. The market appraisal, the one I had done 3 months ago, by a certified independent appraiser values that historic property at $450,000. I let the number hang in the air. That is a $425,000 gap, I continued, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Which constitutes major tax fraud under federal law. IRS Code Section 7201. Willful attempt to evade tax carries a penalty of up to 5 years in federal prison and fines up to $250,000 per person. The smugness evaporated from their faces instantly. Dad's hand froze on his folder. Fallon looked up from her phone, sunglasses sliding down her nose. You wouldn't... Mom stammered. You threatened to tie me up in court for years, I said coldly. You thought this was a civil dispute about a debt. It's not. This is a criminal matter waiting to happen. Sterling stepped forward, his voice low and professional. Here is the reality facing you right now. If Scarlett proceeds with foreclosure, the deed becomes part of the public court record. The IRS monitors foreclosure filings for exactly this kind of discrepancy. They will audit you. They will find the fraud. And given the amount, they will prosecute. However, Sterling continued, if the settlement agreement Scarlett provided 2 days ago is signed unaltered, the lien is released. There is no foreclosure, no public filing. The deed remains internal. I slid my original agreement across the table, covering their pathetic counter-offer. So, I said, you have 2 choices. Option A, you stick to your counter-offer, I foreclose, and you explain to a federal judge why you lied about $425,000 in assets. Option B, you sign this. Right now. You sell your house, pay me back, and Fallon gets a job. Dad looked at the document, then at me. He looked older than he had 2 days ago. He realized, finally, that he wasn't negotiating with his daughter. He was negotiating with an auditor who had found the one error he couldn't hide. "You'd really send us to jail?" he whispered. "You'd really rob me to fund her?" I countered, pointing at Fallon. "Sign the papers, Dad." He picked up the pen. His hand was shaking. He signed. Then he pushed it to Mom. She was crying silently, but she signed too. "You're a monster," Fallon hissed. "This is blackmail." "No, Fallon," I said, taking the signed papers. "Blackmail is illegal. This is just an audit." I checked the signatures. "Perfect. You have 90 days to list the house," I told them, putting the folder back in my bag. "And Fallon, start updating your resume. I hear Starbucks is hiring." I turned and walked out of the cafeteria without looking back. Sterling fell into step beside me. "That went well," he murmured. "It went exactly as calculated," I said. And for the first time in 18 months, I didn't just feel free. I felt finished. 2 months crawled by like years in reverse as I watched the final phase of my plan unfold. I tracked everything with the obsessive precision that made me excellent at my job. The Realtors listing went live in week 1, open houses in week 3, multiple offers by week 5. Dad and Mom accepted a cash offer in week 7, 10,000 below asking, but they were desperate and it showed. The closing happened on a gray Tuesday morning. At 10:47 a.m., my phone buzzed with a bank notification. Wire transfer received, $80,000. I stared at that number for a long moment. $80,000. Every penny I'd given them over a decade, returned in full. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like the end of a chapter I'd been trying to close for 18 months. But the book wasn't finished yet. I picked up my phone and dialed Sterling. "It's done. They paid." "Congratulations," he said warmly. "How do you feel?" "Like I have one more thing to do." I hung up and made my second call to the foreclosure processing company I'd hired 6 weeks ago. The Kingsley property on Heritage Lane. Proceed with eviction. Today. Fallon had exactly 0 days to be surprised. She'd had 2 months to come up with the maintenance fees, 2 months to get a job, 2 months to prove she was anything other than a parasite in designer yoga pants. She'd done nothing but post increasingly unhinged social media rants about toxic family members and karmic justice. Well, karma had arrived, and she was dressed in a sheriff's uniform. I drove to the carriage house one last time, Sterling next to me, parking my Audi Q5 across the street where I could watch. The sheriff's vehicle was already there, along with a moving truck I'd arranged. Professional, efficient, merciless. The front door opened. I could hear Fallon before I could see her. "You can't do this. This is my house. My sanctuary." The sheriff, a patient-looking woman in her 50s, held up the eviction notice. "Ma'am, this is a legal foreclosure. You have 10 minutes to collect personal items. Everything else stays." "No, no!" Fallon's voice climbed to a shriek. "Call my sister. She can't do this. Mom and Dad already paid her back. She got her money." I stepped out of my car and walked toward them slowly, deliberately. Fallon's eyes locked onto me, and the expression on her face was somewhere between betrayal and pure rage. "You!" She lunged forward, but the sheriff blocked her with one arm. "You evil witch! They paid you everything, everything." I stopped at the bottom of the porch steps, looking up at my sister, my baby sister, who I'd once protected from bullies in middle school, who I'd taught to ride a bike, who'd asked me to braid her hair before her first dance. "That money," I said calmly, "paid for your sister's past. This house pays for your laziness." "What are you even talking about?" Fallon screamed. "I needed time to build my brand. You knew that. Everyone knew that." "You had 18 months, I replied. "You could have gotten a job. Any job. Minimum wage at a coffee shop would have covered the maintenance fees, but you didn't. You threw parties and posted pictures and lived in my house like you owned it." "It was mine. They gave it to me." "No," I corrected. "They tried to. But they never actually owned it, did they? Not free and clear. And when they couldn't pay the fines, the city took priority. And when I bought that debt, I took priority. You're not being evicted from your sanctuary, Fallon. You're being evicted from mine. The sheriff gestured to her deputy. Ma'am, your time's up. Let's go. This isn't over, Fallon shrieked as they escorted her down the steps. I'll sue you. I'll ruin you. I'll tell everyone what you did. Please do, I said pleasantly. I'm sure your 73 Instagram followers will be devastated. She tried to lunge at me again, but the deputies had her now, walking her firmly toward the street where a taxi was waiting, also arranged by me. I wasn't completely heartless. She wouldn't be homeless. She'd just be Mom and Dad's problem, in their tiny rental apartment. The thought made me smile. When the taxi pulled away, Fallon's face pressed against the window, still screaming, I turned to the sheriff. Thank you for your professionalism. Just doing my job, ma'am. She handed me the keys. Property's yours now. All legal. I climbed the steps and pushed open the door. The carriage house was exactly as I remembered it, and nothing like it at all. The red brick walls still stood strong, 200 years of history held in their mortar. The oak floors still gleamed, though they were scuffed now from furniture being dragged out, from parties, from neglect. But it was empty. Completely, utterly empty. My footsteps echoed as I walked through the rooms. The living room where Fallon had held her ridiculous influencer gatherings. The kitchen where she'd never cooked a single meal. The yoga studio she'd created in what used to be the library. I stopped in the center of that yoga room and set down the box I'd been carrying. The blender. I lifted it out carefully. It was the same dirty blender from 18 months ago. I'd kept it in this box in my storage unit, the residue on it dried to a hard, odorless crust. The cardboard was creased, the plastic dull. I placed it in the exact center of the oak floor. Then I plugged it into the wall outlet. The cord reached with an inch to spare. I turned the dial to re. The sound tore through the empty house like a scream, like a laugh, like a reckoning. It echoed off the brick walls, bounced across the hardwood, filled every corner of every room with its ridiculous, piercing roar. It was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. I stood there for a moment, watching it vibrate against the floor, listening to it destroy the sanctity of Fallon's precious sanctuary. Then I turned and walked out, closing the door behind me. The blender kept screaming. Sterling was waiting by my car, leaning against the hood with his arms crossed and a proud smile on his face. How do you feel? Like I have one more thing to do, I said. I pulled out my phone and opened a new email. The recipient field automatically populated, tips@irs.gov. Scarlett, Sterling said carefully. You don't have to. Yes, I do. I started typing, my fingers moving with practiced efficiency. Professional ethics won't let me ignore it. $450,000 versus $25,000? That's not a rounding error. That's deliberate fraud. I paused for a moment, thinking about the settlement agreement in Sterling's briefcase. We had promised to release the lien. We had promised not to sue for the $80,000. We never promised to hide a felony. They assumed my silence was part of the purchase price. They forgot that I'm an auditor. I don't cover up discrepancies. I report them. I attached scanned copies of the quitclaim deed, the independent appraisal, and the property records. Everything documented, everything provable. The kind of evidence that would make an IRS agent salivate. Subject: anonymous tip, property valuation fraud. I read aloud as I typed. I am writing to report a significant discrepancy in declared property value. Sterling sighed, but he didn't stop me. He understood. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about principle. I hit send. The email disappeared into the digital void, carrying with it the last connection I had to Royce and Marcella Kingsley. Let the federal government deal with them now. I was done. I pulled the sold sign from my trunk, the realtor's sign I'd requested specifically, and walked to the gate. The architect who'd bought it from me had paid $20,000 above asking. She'd been thrilled at the opportunity, had already drawn up plans to restore it to its former glory. The carriage house would be beautiful again. Just not for Fallon. I hung the sign on the wrought iron gate, making sure it was perfectly centered, perfectly visible. Then I got in my car. Sterling slid into the passenger seat. Where to? I started the engine, looking at the historic red brick house one last time. Behind those walls, a dirty blender was still screaming on an empty floor. The sound of everything they'd given me, Everything they'd taken, everything they'd never understood about who I was and what I was capable of. Home, I said. And I drove away, leaving the past, the toxic family, and the roaring blender behind forever.